welcome guys back. Welcome back, guys, to the Zen Cop, Mac Rollins. Yeah, it's been it's only been a week, I think. I feel like it's only been a week. I was on vacation last week, so my mind's kind of all over the place in terms of I think it was about a week ago. Anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking, sharing. All of that makes a big deal. So don't forget to please like, share, and subscribe. You guys pushing out this info and these videos and even the blog drastically helps get my word out and allows me to gain a larger audience. As most of you already know, this is not a means of me making money. I'm doing this because I enjoy it, and I feel like if there's going to be any sort of change in the future, it's going to come from stuff like this. So on that note, communication, it's key. Communicating in general is something that we as a society, I feel like lately we have struggled to do constructively lately. But as cops, we are very good at it. And if we're so good at it, why are we having such a hard time talking to the newer generation about our expectations? And if there ever was but you didn't tell me to generation in Policing for America, this would be it. One of the things that cops are, in my opinion, the absolute best at is communicating with the general public. And we do it for a living. We do it hundreds or even thousands of times throughout our work week. And some of the general public, they would argue that we are actually horrible communicators. And I blame motor cops for making the highest contribution to that very skewed stereotype. Thanks, fellas. In all seriousness, though, the majority of the time when we are communicating with someone, it's in a scenario where almost exclusively there is a high level of stress involved, and that's kind of the nature of the beast and kind of the crux of our existence as cops. And I guess over time and with experience, we become masters of verbal altercations, and even more so, masters of being able to reduce the most heated of scenarios to a very low simmer. And it takes practice. Takes a lot of practice, and some people are just naturally better than others, but most cops with a decent amount of time on the road should have the ability to walk into just about any scenario, address the issue at hand, and create some type of resolve, ultimately leaving the situation calmer than what they had initially walked into. And if there was a single most prevalent constant in the world of law enforcement, I truly believe that verbal interaction would be it. Now, that being said, why are we having such a hard time connecting with other members of our department, specifically the newest generation of law enforcement? And I want to be clear, I don't care what, level of career you're in right now, whether it's, 1 year or 20 years on the job. This is not a dig, nor is it a hey, you guys suck. This is actually just a general problem that I feel like is being discussed and is pretty palpable throughout law enforcement nationwide. This is not specific to an agency or a department or a state agency. This is I would say it's fairly linear throughout government jobs, period. Not just cops, but I mean, I would say government work overall is having a major disconnect with the quote unquote, new kids. Excuse me. But law enforcement is very different from other career choices. It's linear to some jobs, but it's also light years away from others. It's one of the few jobs in the entire world where the end goal is basically to put ourselves out of business. We are literally taking away our revenue via proactive patrol activity and ultimately by arrest. And I understand that that is a very separate and very deep rabbit hole, but for purposes of the text and the podcast, I'm simply comparing law enforcement to a kind of like a business model corporation, much like I discussed in blog post 14 and video 17. There is no real tangible goal for law enforcement and for the law enforcement employee in terms of actual profit, other than doing your job for the right reasons and then just getting a paycheck, right? Could those so-called right reasons lead to promotions and stuff like that? Perhaps, but there's no guarantee that any of your efforts will ever be recognized or rewarded, for that matter, specifically in law enforcement. Now, the scarier part of that argument is that most of us, and I guess one that we choose to ignore, is that if you read, as you know, if anyone were to read law enforcement policy manuals from across the United States, would you see any verbiage or directive stating that you, the employee, shall go out and arrest bad guys? And I got news for you. Most of them don't. And most new generation cops are some of the first people to point that out, and very quickly. And to put that into a sentence that I've heard with my own ears, quote, it doesn't say that I have to do anything, end quote. And that's a very scary thing to hear from a cop with maybe 2 years on the road and not a lot to show for it. So why the disconnect? Where did we go wrong? Why are we seeing such a bizarre dip in the lack of motivation? Why are the new kids so afraid of getting their hands dirty? Unfortunately, it's much more complicated than what we assume is the root issue. The older cops are pretty quick to point their very tired and overworked fingers at the new generation and simply say, "You guys suck," right? They're pretty quick to complain. And then they simply assume that the other half of that problem knows how to fix the issue. The problem is that they don't. They don't know how to fix the problem because they don't have any clue what the problem actually is. And if we ask them to do more, this new generation is going to ask, how much more? And the answer can't be just more. Tangible goals are going to be the future of communication for this new group of cops. And without them, we won't see any positive results as a career field. And that old concept of, when the boss says jump, the employee says how high. These days it will be jump, and the employee is going to say, well, what do I get if I jump? And you better have an answer. More than tangibility, however, comes the reason why they are here and why we are, jumping to begin with, metaphorically. In order for us to truly understand the issues, we need to be asking the right questions. And one of the most important questions we can ask right now is, why are fewer people than ever seeing this job as a calling? And this job, it used to be something that was make or break, sink or swim. It was a very scary career field to enter. And I think everyone can relate to that to some degree. When you were younger, or even thinking about this job, there was not a lot of wiggle room in, you making it or not. You either had the fortitude to do it or you didn't. And there were no half interested people. And if there were, they were washed out of the academy within the first week, right? And then the stragglers who, you can spot them a mile away in some of the earlier weeks of the academy. Some guys who still thought they could make it, and gals, and they did their best to continue, but ultimately they were cut loose and fairly swiftly, and with good reason, right? And then you had the cream of the crop, the best of the best. Every single person in that graduating academy was razor sharp and knew that they were not only made for the job, but they knew that they had what it takes to do the job and do the job well. More commonly these days, I would say we see about half of academy attendees who are just kind of giving it a shot. Like, I'll try it, see what happens. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with testing the water when it comes to an interest in any career field. But I would suggest giving it a shot should be more applicable to, golf, rock climbing, yoga, hobbies, things that we could try and probably like or hate. And the world would lose nothing as a result if you were to choose yoga instead of golf. Both good for you. But, one may not necessarily be as popular as the other for the individual. The problem is, for sake of society and criminal enterprise, these give it a shots, right? They're graduating from the academy because the standards have been set so low to accommodate the supply and demand for a consistent police presence across this country. And most agencies and academies are so hell-bent on filling boots that they don't care what feet go inside, right? As echoed by so many agencies right now, people say, we just need the bodies. but it's only a matter of time before those desperate decisions cost us an infinite amount of chaos in the future. And I always tell people that remember that even before we had the issue we have today, when things were actually operating in our favor, it only took one bad guy passing a fake 20 and one cop who made a horrible decision to change the course of history forever. And I mean, sadly, that's how close we skate to the edge every day. And most of society either doesn't understand it, don't care, or they just have no clue. So, where does communication fall into this very complicated and sometimes seemingly irreparable mess we currently have as a country? Now, if you're reading this or listening to this, it starts with you. You are part of the effort to change the problem. You as an individual, you have gone out of your way to listen to and or absorb the viewpoint of someone who is also trying to instill change in a career field that many people are currently walking away from. You, the listener or the reader, you are making an effort to seek someone else's guidance or perspective in an effort to hopefully use said information to instill change in your agency or career field. Now, how we move forward with that change is through communication. Um, and this new generation, they don't need to be told that they suck. They need to be told how not to suck. And they need to be taught the basic moral fibers that hold us together as humans in a civilized society where crime is afraid and society feels safe. And I, like many others, I used to be of the mindset, well, it's not my job to tell these kids what to do. I'm not an FTO. I'm not a supervisor. I'm not this. I'm not that. Well, I got some bad news for you. It is your job. If you're in this career field and you're still here, it is your job. It's our job. That is, of course, if you want to be part of the reason why things get better. If you don't, fine, but don't bitch about it to me or anyone else. There is no singular or otherwise I in a career field that is based on a team collective. And the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we may all actually see some positive reform efforts by command staff and our community, and ideally local and state government in the big picture. Now, with this newer generation, we don't need to hold their hand, but we need to set an example and we need to communicate. We have to talk to them. If they are afraid to do the job itself, walk with them. If they are in fear of what could happen to them legally, teach them, especially case law. If they are confused as to why we exist, show them by example. There will never be a period in any cop's life where this job will actually make sense. It's the inner strife of repetition that will eventually drive us insane. And it's important, however, for all of us to understand that while this job does carry an insane amount of repetition, no day will ever be like the day you had before. And if we were to reflect on Greek mythology, we would learn that no man ever steps into the same river twice, for it is never the same river, and he is never the same man. Learn, grow, teach, and above all, communicate. Guys, thank you so much. This was a quicker one than usual, but I just wanted to get something out there before the work week starts. Please like, subscribe, comment. You can find me on Instagram at the Zen Cop, Twitter, YouTube, and if you're interested in emailing me, the zencop@gmail.com. Thanks, guys, for listening. I appreciate everyone being a part of this. Again, communication is key. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.